is finally here! After 20 plus years, the first sequel to the Chaos Gate series has finally arrived. The original was the game that got me into 40k, and after 20 years, we have received a worthy successor. We went from this to this. And man, is this game glorious! It has become my favorite 40k game. Nay, it has become my favorite Games Workshop game. Nay, it has become my favorite turn-based RPG game ever! Full disclosure, this guide only covers how to get a good start to the campaign along with some battle tips. I still haven't finished the campaign yet because your boy is addicted to glorious melee, and that tends to bite me in the ass more often than not. So without further ado, let's get on with the guide. I am assuming that you have completed the tutorial, so I will be skipping over the more basic stuff. Let's begin with the best team comp for the early campaign, on Legendary difficulty. I've only played Legendary difficulty, and in that, the best comp early on is 2 Justicars, 1 DPS, either a sissy Pew Pew Purgator or glorious melee Interceptor, and 1 Apothecary. Later in the game, I switched to 1 Justicar and 2 Interceptor because y'all know ya boy is all about that melee. Although the more I play this game, I think 3 Justicars in the beginning of the campaign might work best. That's because tier 1 gear doesn't add a lot of damage to your DPS. And because everyone has very few skill points, the Justicars have almost the same damage output as the Interceptors and the Purgators, while being super tanky. The most important thing about building Justicars is to get everything in the Aegis shield tree except for the Psychic Fortress. Healing in this game is very limited, and if your guys take as much as a scratch in the battlefield, they will end up with light wound modifiers, which on Legendary campaign can take almost 30 days to recover. Wounded status can take 60 plus. Basically, on Legendary, your squad will look like this. That is why the Aegis shield tree is so important, because it's the best way to negate any health damage a character can take. All Justicars must be in Terminator armor. The only drawback of which is that you can't climb some areas, and so we'll have to take the longer routes to approach the enemy. The only skill that is a must on the Interceptor is the extended range on the teleport. And the only thing you need to do with the Purgator is click this. Range is for the weak. Batman, I think. First new recruit you should look for is the second Apothecary, that you can switch out when the first one is wounded. And the first thing you need to realize about combat is that it has 2 phases, the movement phase and the combat phase. You don't transition from one to the other until you spot the enemy or they spot you. Once the transition occurs, all action points are refunded. And also the transition does not count as the turn ending. This is very important because it allows you to walk right up to the enemy's detection range, pop Aegis shields on everyone, and then begin combat. You will notice that all your character's action points have been refunded, and you have still retained your armor at the beginning of combat. This gives you a massive advantage in the first round of a fight. Also, when approaching enemy missions, try to stick close to the edges of the map. The way reinforcements and patrol units work in this game, you can get surrounded by multiple enemies very easily. By sticking to the edges, you ensure that there is at least one flank where the enemy cannot approach you from. You do not want to be in a situation where you're fighting an enemy squad and then a patrol unit pops up at the same time as the warp surge poops out some reinforcement. Another way to avoid getting surrounded is to pull the enemy back. Remember, you don't have to fight where the combat phase begins, so you can lure them to a safer location where you've cleared all the patrols already and fight them there. Environmental damage and utility in this game is the best I have ever experienced. I have played a ton of RPGs, and I have always ignored environmental traps because they always felt like a waste of action points. But in this game, using the environment is very satisfying. The over-the-top animation and the ridiculous damage are not even what makes it good. The best part is how the crashing pillars and the exploding crates send the enemy flying. Use the environmental traps as if you were playing pool. Knock enemies off cliff, into other explosives, out of cover, or closer to your melee for a swift and glorious butchering. Stormbolters at max range don't do a lot of damage, but always do the same amount of stun. Use them at max range to bring the enemy close to stun before sending in your interceptors for the stun into execute combo. It is possible to use this method to chain massive number of executes in a row. With the help of the action point stratagem, I've gotten as high as 7 in a row. Executes are very important as they reward the entire squad with bonus AP, so make them a priority in your strategy. The way crit works in this game is that it triggers the part destruction mechanic on top of doing extra damage. The extra damage on crit is not that high, but the part destruction mechanic is very powerful. It can be used to stun or cripple your opponent, making crit the most powerful stat. Cripple opponents do almost no damage, so sometimes when you're facing a large number of troops, it's better to cripple certain high threats and then focus down the chaff before finishing everyone off. The most important research trees are the seed extraction and warp surge reduction trees. Stratagems are powerful but are limited to one-time use per battle. The other two trees seem weak but are extremely helpful in late game, especially when the map opens up. Similarly, resources in a matter of importance are as follows: servitors, then grimoires, and then requisition. Requisition is the least important early game resource because the items and recruits you get early on are only slightly better than the default units. Don't focus on requisition until you have unlocked tier 2 resources in the armory. Servitors, on the other hand, are a must. You need your ship to move fast. The way the bloom spawns makes it hard to tackle more than one at a time. Once the map expands, it becomes even harder. If you want to consistently reach at least 2 at a time, you will need a fast ship. And for that, you need a lot of construction and fast construction. So the upgrades that are your priority are the warp drive and the servitor manufactorum. Other miscellaneous tips: the number on top of your pointer is the amount of action points that will remain if you move a character. You can figure out line of sight with this nearly invisible thin blue line that appears when you are hovering the pointer over a spot that you want to move to. If there is no line of sight to the enemy on that spot, then the blue line will not appear. Also, the range damage you'll do from that spot is displayed in a small red circle above the enemy. This guide is designed to help you guys in the early game campaign on legendary difficulty. I'm still working on the late game guide, but because this game is so massive, it's going to take me a little while to do. I just might split the main legendary guide into 5 or 6 smaller ones revolving around each of the major boss fights. Or I might just do one massive one. Let me know what y'all think. I'm also planning to do a full walkthrough on legendary difficulty with Grandmaster setting on. So if y'all are interested in seeing that, let me know in the comment section below. So until next time, peace.